Welcome back to the PhoneGap Essentials course on NetTuts Plus Premium. In this lesson we're going to be looking at the Compass API. Using this API, we're able to determine in which direction the device is currently facing. Just like the accelerometer and the geolocation API, PhoneGap allows us to have a constant stream of compass information coming through with the watch heading function. This function consists of a success callback, an error callback, and options. In the options we can decide the frequency, which is how often we update our compass heading, and there is another option called filter. Filter is simply an iOS option that changes the way we receive the information. Instead of periodically receiving compass updates, with filter, the compass will only update if the heading is changed by a specified amount. For now, let's just try it out. In Eclipse, I'm going to get started by opening up my index.js file. Once our device is ready, we can set up the call to the compass object. Firstly, I'm defining the options. I'm setting the frequency at 100 milliseconds. And now let's initiate the compass. Once again, in order to be able to stop and start the compass, we need to have a reference to it at the top level of our app. This way, any function can access the watch ID to either turn off or turn on the compass. As you can see, to access the compass, we use the navigator object, .compass, and then the function watch heading. On success, we call app.onCompassSuccess. On error, we call onCompassError, and we include our options at the end. Now let's block out those two functions. Our success function gets passed a heading variable which contains the directional information, and our error function gets passed a compass error object. If we have a compass error, we're just going to open up an alert box that tells us the compass error code. On success, however, we're going to update our test zone div and print in heading plus heading.magnetic heading. The heading object contains a couple of different pieces of information. We can find out more about this object in the docs. As you can see, the different properties of compass heading are magnetic heading and true heading. Now, while there is a difference between the magnetic north and the true north, it's not really important for this lesson. What is important is that the value will always come back as a number between 0 and 359.99. We also receive a heading accuracy value, which reports the difference between the magnetic heading and the true heading. And we receive a timestamp. It's important to note, and one of the Android quirks is that true heading is not supported, and that value will always be exactly the same as magnetic heading. If we try to run this in the Android emulator, we're just going to get another error. So we're going to have to export it. To device. We go and run and export to my Galaxy S2. Here you can see the heading value, and as I change the orientation of the phone, that heading value changes as well. So let's take this one step further. We're going to take that heading reading and apply it to an object on the screen. We're going to create our object out of a couple of divs and some simple CSS. We have a containing div called needle and two internal divs, one called red and one called blue. In our CSS, we can define those divs to create a long, tall rectangle that we will center in the middle of our test zone div. Here are our style values for our needle div. It has a width of 10, a height of 200, and we've positioned it absolutely so it will be in the center of its parent. The margin left and margin top will make sure it is correctly centered in the middle of the div. Now we're going to style our blue and red divs. They will both take up half of the rectangle each, 100 pixels, and one will be red and one will be blue. When you're getting your HTML and CSS right, especially for interface elements, you can often check out your designs and code in a normal web browser. Here we can see that our CSS and div needle is looking just about right. So let's go into the JavaScript file to change its rotation based on the heading. The first thing we need to do is create a reference in our application to the needle object. I'm going to define the needle object using getElementById. So now we have a reference to it that we can use throughout the app. I'm going to comment out this code here because we're no longer writing anything to the inner HTML of test zone, and instead we're going to update a rotation attribute on our needle object every time we get a new compass value. So on our needle object we're applying the JavaScript method setAttribute, and we're going to change the style attribute, and we're going to set a WebKit transform using the rotate option. Now, while WebKit would be a problem if we were making this for all browsers and we wanted to support Explorer, Safari, Firefox and all the rest, but since we're exporting for a modern mobile browser, we should be alright. As you can see, with rotate, we're setting the rotation of our needle object by the magnetic heading. So let's export to device and see how that worked out. As you can see, our needle object is changing its rotation on the screen depending on the heading or the actual device rotation. And that's all there is to it really for the Compass API. It's quite a simple object and only really returns one value of interest, which is a number between 0 and 360 representing the degrees. Check back in for lesson 10 where we'll be looking at the Contacts API. Ciao!